And thank you very much for making a date with me today on the marketplace. Welcome back. The government has strongly defended its revenue and macro targets outlined in the 2020 budget. This follows concerns that the revenue targets as well as macroeconomic targets in the budget are ambitious. George Yafe has more in this report.
The concerns have come up again following revelations that government missed out on its revenue target as at the end of September this year. This was more than 5 billion Ghana cedis short of what it is hoping to realize. Many are of the view that this would have influenced the finance minister's projection for next year. However, it looks like it didn't affect that. He's now looking at mobilizing 67 billion Ghana cedis. This is about 13 billion Ghana cedis more than what it is hoping to get in 2019. But speaking to Joy Business, Deputy Minister of Finance Kuku Kwatin insists they have instituted some fresh measures that will help them meet the 2020 revenue target. For some economists, they are worried about this target because of its impact on the budget deficit, which has been pegged in cash terms as 19 billion Ghana cedis. And let's look at its implications for the economy going forward. This is because mobilizing more taxes are seen as a major source of funding for government's financial operations. But the question many are asking themselves is that will the country be able to get the solution or the answer to mobilizing the required taxes, looking at the size of our economy and the kind of activities that are currently taking place in the economy?
So that was George Yafe's report. He joins me in the studio to explore more concerning government's revenue targets. George, welcome to the marketplace.
Thank you so much.
Now, why is revenue still a target, even though the budget is yet to take off?
I mean, you would want to ask yourself that we've not gotten into 2020. Why are people making or raising issues with the 2020 at this particular time? Because already as of September end, then as the report said, we are down by 5 billion Ghana cedis. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And our concerns about taxes, our concerns about budget overruns, it all has to do with revenue again. So everyone is thinking that the approach will be different going into 2020 to ensure that we end the year on a good note. People are thinking that, okay, if you set this target for yourself and you are not able to meet it, it looks like we won't meet that target in 2019. So maybe be moderate. Now, if you look at the 2019 numbers, compared to what they want to achieve in 2020, about 13 billion Ghana cedis. Now, that is an ambitious target. If you engage some of the economists, if you engage those who work within the revenue space, that is what they are saying, that why don't you be moderate? Because if you also moderate with your revenue, that would also impact on your expenditure. Look at the amount of money we are trying to spend next year. That's also huge as well.
And you don't think that government would have to do well to implement all the promises made, during the campaign period? And for that reason, it has to raise that amount.
Yes, you need to raise that amount, but be realistic, because when you come up with targets, there are wider implications than just not being able to meet those targets. You are telling your investment partners, you are telling donors, you are telling this person that this is my plan for the year. Now, a lot of people depend on this budget to also plan when you have to talk about deficit, revenue, and all the rest. So if every time you have to set targets and you come back to review them, it is normal though, but it raises some credibility issues because people will think, okay, it looks like government again will not end up meeting this thing. I mean, there's always a plus 2 minus 2. So why don't you work with the moderate numbers, again, bring in the thought of those economists and revenue persons, and then if you mobilize more than what you done, one is good. But when you give the impression that you can mobilize X amount, when activities on the ground doesn't support that, you leave those investors and donors worried, because you also have to have a budget. You're having a budget deficit. You're projecting about 19 billion Ghana cedis. That's huge. The fact that your economy is expanding, and that will still be under 5% of that, you shouldn't be excited by that. But on a cash basis, that's a lot of money.
Now, is it an indication that government could go on to borrow more and add up to the already inflating figures with debt?
Of course, when you go through the budget, it's going to borrow more. It's going to do some Euro bonds or borrow internationally and all the rest. So you're going to use the expected revenues that will come in for our natural resources, gold and all the rest, to raise some money as well. And you ask yourself, how are they going to finance the deficit? And it just means that they have to borrow more to finance. But why are you or you and I are worried about this is that when they borrow these monies and they don't go into projects that would finance itself, if you look at our expenditure, it's just a fraction of that is going to capital expenditure. A lot of them are going to consumption. And if you also look at the size of our economy, the argument is that if you see the activities that are going on in our country, they're just taxing a fraction of that. So it looks like a lot more work has to be done to ensure that all those activities that are taking place in this economy are taxed.
Now, in all this, what are not the experts, but government people, what are they saying? Are they also worried about
they are optimistic. They believe that as work in progress. They put in place some of the measures. They think that they are working on technology to all those things. And they believe that some of these measures will close the gap from them. This year will really be a test. I'm saying that at the end of December, we are short by the December target by 5 billion.
That's huge.
We need to extrapolate and look at the end of the year. That could be around 50 or even 50 something or so. And if you're down by this, it raises a lot of issues, because don't forget that in planning your budget, you have based those projects that you want to undertake from this expected revenue. Now, if they are not going to come in and these projects are seen or are deemed as critical, then you have to go out and borrow.
So let's take the scenario. Should petroleum prices, for instance, go up on the international market and we show up, or we're able to increase our revenues on oil or from oil, would it in any way reduce the impact on the project?
Let's even do the scenarios. If oil prices could even hit about $200 a barrel,
exactly,
how significant would that be coming in? And if you look at what government has to do this year, or even next year, you are not going to. I know, but again, you are not going to hit more than $1 billion or maybe $5 billion. And don't forget, the economy is expanded. So the argument here is that in terms of credibility, in terms of, again, when you also have very tight expenditure or macro targets, it whips you into line. It forces you, because then you know that you are trying to hit this amount of money. You work everything out to ensure that you also have a very close deficit. You work hard. So the concern here is that the hope is that, we will raise this money, so maybe let's go and spend. If maybe you have a lower revenue target, it would also whip you into line to check your revenue and ensure that the deficit doesn't widen. But the concern here is that you think that you mobilize more, and therefore you also want to go out and peg those expected revenue to some projects. And if it doesn't come, there'll be, don't forget, our bane has always been a deficit. It's huge, and you have to go out and find ways to finance it. So that's where the problem is.
Here
it's a very serious issue, and we are just hoping that the revenue that they are hoping to collect, or tax they are hoping to collect, it materializes.
Thank you very much, George, for that update. Now, the finance minister in the 2020 budget statement disclosed that government has secured $250 million from the World Bank as part of resources to operationalize a national development bank. Government says this is key, or is a key step in dealing with lending to productive sectors of the economy. But what do other players in the productive sector also believe? CEO of AGI, Seth Chumakwaba, spoke on the business edition of PM Express on JoyNews last night.
The areas he's mentioned are very important. He's talking about NIB, for example, being supported, ADB. These are critical financial institutions for development. NIB for industrial development, ADB for agricultural development. The entire chain must work. And then they are coming up with a development bank. And indeed, the essence of having a development bank is to be able to give a different kind of funding, not the typical commercial lending, which is short-term in nature, very short moratorium, with very high interest rates and all that. So if you're able to have effective development bank, it means that it's going to intervene in the area of long-term funding. And if you want to do one district, one factory, it is so critical that you have a kind of financing arrangement that supports it. Bear in mind that if you take the one district, one factory, for example, most of them are startups, because the industries are not already existing in the district. That's why we say one district, one factory. So they are basically new industries that are going to be set up. Meanwhile, when you go to the normal commercial banks, they are going to be asking for, your 3-year or so,
3 to 5 years,
3 to 5 years financial records and all that. And you don't have that. And therefore, you need a kind of financing mechanism that is project-oriented, that is able to take a bit of risk, and look more into the future instead of the past. So, and you need a development bank to do that. So doing so will help a great deal.
Meanwhile, government projected a revenue target of about 67 billion. Now, some have described it as ambitious, but government believes it can be achieved with some reforms, such as revamping of the Ghana Revenue Authority. At the core of this is using technology to drive tax revenue mobilization. Anthony Sapon, senior partner at accounting firm KPMG, also shares some thoughts on PM Express.
You bring onto yourself additional challenges that disturbs the economy, that disturbs the macro stability that businesses need to survive. And therefore, talking about domestic revenue is one of the key things that I'm happy that this budget, the minister has signaled that they are going to work on. And if you look at where they are going to work on, they are saying that I'm not going to create new taxes, but let me look at the efficiency and effectiveness with which we can even mobilize from what we have. And one of the critical things is mentioned is introduction of technology. GRA for some time has been implementing some form of technology to assist in the mobilization of revenue. But at the end of the day, I think there's still some way to go. And these are some of the areas that I believe, based on what has been done so far to date, they can enhance it. And I'll give some good examples. In the area of withholding tax, we have implemented withholding tax for a long time. So for instance, if KPMG provides a service to an institution and the service is paying KPMG, depending upon the types of service, that entity will withhold 5% or 7.5%, depending upon the type of service. So that 5% will be paid by that institution and hand over to GRA, quoting that KPMG provided service A to me and I've paid this tax. If we have technology that will be able to trace all withholding taxes that various businesses have deducted from the service provider, at the end of the day, GRA will be able to determine and say, at a minimum, at least once withholding tax has been deducted, at a minimum, this is your income. Because one of the things we struggle with in this country is identify the accurate and complete income of people. And that can only be done if we use technology to stay ahead of the curve.
This is live on the marketplace. Let's turn attention to oil and gas now. As part of its commitment to deepening local content participation, oil exploration firm Tullow Ghana has awarded contracts to the tune of $240 million to indigenous companies, representing about 31% of its total spending. According to the firm, this is part of efforts to empower Ghanaian professionals to contribute to the socio-economic development of the nation. Executive Vice President of Tullow Oil PLC, Kwekwe Wutri, spoke with Joy Business at a local content recognition dinner where Tullow rewarded 30 local suppliers for their dedication to local content development in the country. Bismarck Ausa has more.
From an industry that has close to zero local content expenditure about a decade ago, Tullow Oil Ghana has between 2010 and 2018 awarded in excess of $10 billion worth of contracts to indigenous and joint venture companies with indigenous equity participation. This is out of a total of $16.4 billion worth of contracts awarded. According to the Executive Vice President of Tullow Oil PLC, Kweku Aoche, Tullow is committed to making local content represent the majority of the entire oil and gas sector cake.
Ghana has been mining for 100 years, and if you go to cities like Obuasi and Takwa, you wonder what happened to the money. So if we don't develop local content in Ghana in a meaningful way, our cities will become like Obuasi and Takwa. And we don't want that to happen again after another 100 years. So local content is very important because for the money to stay in the country, we need to build capacity. We need to train people. We need to train people to be the welders. We need people to be trained to be the managers. And we need people to form the companies to supply the products, the goods and services to supply the industry.
Tullow has also hinted of plans to award marine vessel area contracts to indigenous companies in 5 to 10 years. Meanwhile, Director of Petroleum and Upstream at the Ministry of Energy, Ben Asante, has lauded Tullow Oil and expressed the ministry's commitment to the oil and gas sector.
Together we can succeed. Let's work together. I want to promise all of you here that the ministry is ready to support you. The ministry is ready to help you so that together we can all succeed as a country, within the oil industry, that we don't need people to tell us what to do because we know what to do.
The Tallow Oil Contents Award saw providers of heavy lifts in Ghana, Moby Crane, recognized as longest-serving indigenous suppliers. Other winners include Consolidated Shipping Agencies Limited, Rig World International Services, Results Advertising, Goyle, among others. Bismarck Ausas reports for Joy Business.
The Ghana Investment Promotion Center, GIPC, is throwing the spotlight on agribusiness as it celebrates top 100 distinguished businesses in the country at this year's Ghana Club 100. The award seeks to highlight agriculture as a launch pad for Ghana's industrial drive. Yofi Grant is CEO for the GIPC.
Agriculture has been significantly a mainstay of our economy for quite a while, till recently when we saw a significant drop in the growth rates of agriculture as a contribution to the economy. But to the extent that it's believed that close to 55% of our population is engaged somewhere in the industry along the value chain, either in the production, the processing, the selling and merchandising of agriculture. And if that's the case, then it's it takes quite a lot of effort from our people. And we believe that we do have what it takes to make it the basis or the foundations of our industrial policy by value addition. It may not require as much as to require for industry, but for actual manufacturing, but for processing of agricultural goods, I think we do have the foundations to make that happen more significantly. It is the low-hanging fruit of industrialization.
Let's turn our attention to the Ashanti region now. A policy analyst is urging speedy implementation of the Science, Technology and Innovation Policy to push the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. Professor Rudith King of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology says Ghana's quest to achieving the SDGs is stagnating because a policy document finalized in 2017 has been shelved. He was speaking at a statistical analyst training workshop in Kumasi.
Professor King believes Ghana's development depends on implementing the policy to address the country's problems in science, technology and innovation.
We want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We require nothing but science, and any delay in ensuring that we mainstream science in the things we do in this country will prevent us from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. These goals, 17 goals, require nothing but science. We are talking about flooding, we are talking about climate change, we are talking about urban issues that require nothing but science to help us to address them. So we need innovations, we need to do things differently, we need new ways of doing things. Our water bodies are all dirty and we are all worried about it. What do? It is the scientists that can help us to clean these water bodies and to have life in the water that can sustain us, because it's all about the environment, and science is the only way we can use to sustain our environment for life. So for me, any delay in ensuring the implementation of the STI policy can affect us and can delay our attainment of the Sustainable Development Goal.
27 women scientists from Ghana and Nigeria are attending the statistical analysis training. The University Laboratory for Interdisciplinary Statistical Analysis is facilitating the training to promote collaboration between researchers and policymakers. Professor Tinike Olusula Adibanje is program coordinator.
This workshop was on data science and the statistical competence, building statistical competence for the participants, as well as looking at policy formulations and implementations. And this is the second workshop, and this focuses more on leadership, building skills and competencies for the women in people management, person management, and as well as career development.
Reporting for JoyNews, Kwesi Debra.
Now, 200 wards of farmers have received scholarship packages worth 100,000 Ghana cedis from Yonkopa Child Education Support Under a farmer assistance scheme, children of beneficiaries in formal education or apprenticeship will receive at least 500 Ghana cedis. Officials say the package complements government's commitment to improving education. Nana Sensumeza has more.
Yonkodo Farmer Life Program is a 3-pack policy to reward farmers who sell their cocoa beans to Yonkopa cocoa buyers. The child education support is a scholarship policy that empowers farmers and lessens their burden on socio-economic commitments. Robert Asugri is sustainability manager of Yonkopa buyers.
We realize that supporting the farmers through training and farm development, they still have needs. They have socio-economic needs. In terms of FINRA, they have financial difficulties. In terms of educating their children, they have financial difficulties. And we all know that no farmer in Ghana has a pension policy or program. So we designed this 3-pack benefit for the farmers to benefit from. And then the pension program, we are also saying that you need to contribute to the program for at least 7 years. And then the 7 years period, when you are 60 years, then you can attain your pension. And you need to consistently contribute 15 bucks or more for 7 years. And so for you to qualify for this program, you need to be about 52 years. Because if you take 7 years out of 60 years, level is 53 years. So 52 years to start contributing, and then you spend the 7 years for contribution, and then you start earning your pension. And then the child educational support program, by design, we are saying that every year you will earn 250 Ghana cedis for your child. So for 2 years period, you have 500 for your child to support the children to continue their education. If your children may be in school, or if they are learning a trade, you can take the money and support them. So this is how we have designed the 3-pack Nyankodo Farmer Life program for our farmers. The basic aim is to support our farmers, lessen their burden on the socio-economic front in terms of their households, community, and the country at large. And this is in addition to our sustainability program they are running to support their farms, to support their households, help them get them out of poverty, and empower the communities and the households.
At the launch of the scheme at Seshiyoso in the Western North region, some beneficiaries of the scholarship program spoke to Joy Business.
And it's a wrap on the marketplace. Many thanks for your company today and, of course, throughout the week. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. We are free. Have a good afternoon.